Last month, my 35-year-old daughter told me that her anxiety issues stem from the fact that I was too controlling when she was 12. My 32-year-old son believes his fear of commitment comes from watching my marriage fall apart when he was in college. According to my children, I am responsible for their trust issues, their financial problems, their relationship struggles, and apparently their inability to keep houseplants alive. If you reappear at over 50 and you've become the convenient explanation for everything that's gone wrong in your adult children's lives, this conversation is for you. Because I've discovered something that might surprise you about this painful dynamic, and it's changed how I respond to these accusations entirely. Pour yourself some tea, get comfortable, and let me share what I've learned about being blamed for your children's problems long after they've left home. It started innocently enough. My daughter went to therapy in her late 20s, which I was actually proud of her for doing. Taking care of your mental health is important, and I encouraged it. But somewhere along the way, those therapy sessions became archaeological digs into her childhood, with me cast as the villain in every recovered memory. Suddenly, conversations that had nothing to do with the past would circle back to something I had done or said 20 years ago. The time I made her change clothes because her outfit was inappropriate for church became evidence of body shaming. The boundaries I set around curfew became proof that I didn't trust her judgment. Even the year we couldn't afford to go on vacation became a story about how I prioritized work over family. I remember sitting in my kitchen after one particularly difficult phone call, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of accusations. Every decision I had made as a young parent was being scrutinized through the lens of modern psychology and found wanting. I started questioning everything I thought I knew about my own parenting, wondering if I really had been as terrible as my children were making me out to be. But here's what I began to notice. My children seemed to have very selective memories about their childhoods. They could recall in vivid detail every time I lost my patience, every mistake I made, every moment I fell short of perfection. But they had forgotten the thousands of bedtime stories, the countless soccer games I attended, the middle of the night comfort when they were sick, the sacrifices I made to give them opportunities I never had. The most painful part wasn't the accusations themselves. It was realizing that my children had rewritten the story of their childhood. And in this new version, I wasn't a young parent doing my best under difficult circumstances. I was a collection of mistakes and failures, a convenient explanation for everything they were struggling with as adults. I started to wonder if this was just my family, or if other parents were experiencing this too. So I began talking to friends, really talking, and discovered that I wasn't alone. Parent blaming had become almost epidemic among adults in their 20s and 30s, and those of us who raised them were left feeling confused, hurt, and somehow responsible for problems that seemed to have nothing to do with our parenting. Now, let me be clear about something. Therapy is wonderful. Working through childhood trauma is important. Examining how your upbringing affects your adult life is healthy. But somewhere along the way, we've created a culture where every personal struggle needs a childhood explanation, and parents have become the default suspects. I noticed this shift happening gradually. When I was raising my children, the focus was on moving forward, building resilience, learning to cope with life's challenges. But my children's generation seems to spend enormous amounts of time looking backward, analyzing every interaction, every family dynamic, every less than perfect moment from their childhood. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't a perfect parent. No one is. I made mistakes. I lost my temper sometimes. I probably said things I shouldn't have said. I was a young adult myself, learning as I went, dealing with my own stress and challenges while trying to raise human beings. But the idea that my imperfect parenting is responsible for every difficulty my adult children face seems both unfair and, frankly, disempowering to them. Here's what I've come to understand about this dynamic. When we blame our childhood for our adult problems, we're essentially saying that we have no agency over our own lives. We're victims of our upbringing, powerless to change or grow or overcome the influence of our parents. And while it's true that childhood experiences shape us, the idea that they doom us is both harmful and untrue. I started researching this topic and discovered that resilience research shows us something fascinating. Children who grow up in the same household with the same parents often have completely different outcomes as adults. Some struggle, some thrive, some fall somewhere in between. If parenting were the determining factor in adult success and happiness, siblings would all turn out similarly. But they don't. This realization was both liberating and heartbreaking for me. Liberating because it meant that my children's problems weren't necessarily my fault. Heartbreaking because it meant I couldn't fix them either. I had to accept that my adult children were responsible for their own lives, their own choices, their own healing. The more I thought about this pattern, the more I realized that blame was becoming a prison for all of us. My children were stuck in the past, unable to move forward because they were so focused on what had gone wrong in their childhood. And I was stuck too, constantly defending decisions I had made decades ago, trying to explain circumstances my children couldn't possibly understand from their current perspective. I remember trying to explain to my son why I had worked so many hours when he was young. I was a single mother after his father left, trying to keep us afloat financially while building a career that could support us long term. But in his memory, I was just never there for his baseball games. The context didn't matter. The sacrifice didn't register. Only the absence remained in his mind. This is when I realized something crucial. My children weren't really angry about their childhood. They were frustrated with their adult lives. And childhood became the explanation because it was easier than taking responsibility for changing things now. It is more comfortable to blame your mother for your anxiety than to do the hard work of managing it. It's simpler to point to your father's mistakes than to examine your own patterns in relationships. But here's the trap. The more we engage with these accusations, the more we validate the idea that we are responsible for our adult children's problems. Every time we defend ourselves, every time we try to explain our decisions, every time we apologize for not being perfect parents, we're reinforcing the narrative that their struggles are our fault. I spent months walking on eggshells around my children, afraid to say anything that might trigger another list of my parenting failures. I found myself constantly apologizing, constantly trying to make up for mistakes I had made 20 years ago. But nothing I said or did seemed to be enough. The blame continued, and my children seemed more stuck than ever in their victim narratives. That's when I realized that my constant apologizing and defending wasn't helping them heal. It was enabling them to stay focused on the past instead of taking charge of their present. I wasn't being kind by accepting responsibility for their adult problems. I was being codependent. The turning point came during a particularly difficult conversation with my daughter. She was listing all the ways my parenting had damaged her, expecting me to apologize and take responsibility as I always had. But this time, I said something different. I said, "I hear that you're struggling, and I'm sorry you're in pain. But I can't change the past, and neither can you. What are you going to do about these issues now?" The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. She was unprepared for me to stop defending myself or to redirect the conversation to her current choices and actions. She had become so comfortable with the blame game that she hadn't considered what came next. This doesn't mean I became cold or dismissive. I still love my children deeply, and I want them to heal and be happy. But I realized that taking responsibility for their adult problems wasn't helping them. It was keeping them stuck in childhood, unable to develop the resilience and agency they needed to create better lives for themselves. I started responding differently to their accusations. Instead of defending my parenting decisions, I would say things like, "That sounds really difficult for you. What are you doing to work through those feelings?" Instead of apologizing for not being perfect, I would acknowledge their pain while redirecting them to their own power to heal. The shift wasn't easy and it wasn't immediate. My children were used to me taking responsibility for their problems, and they didn't like it when I stopped. There were some difficult conversations, some periods of silence, some accusations that I had become selfish and uncaring. But gradually, something beautiful began to happen. My children started taking more responsibility for their own healing. They began talking about their therapy sessions differently, focusing on their own growth rather than cataloging my failures. They started making changes in their lives instead of just complaining about the effects of their childhood. Most importantly, they began to see me as a human being who had done her best under difficult circumstances, rather than as the source of all their problems. Today, my relationship with my adult children is healthier than it's been in years. Not because I became a perfect parent retroactively, but because I stopped trying to be one. I accepted that I had made mistakes, that I had been learning as I went, and that my imperfect parenting had still produced capable, intelligent, and fundamentally good human beings. I also accepted something else. My children's struggles as adults are not a reflection of my failure as a parent. People face challenges regardless of their upbringing. Mental health issues, relationship problems, career difficulties, financial stress. These are part of the human experience, not necessarily the result of inadequate parenting. This doesn't mean I dismiss the impact of childhood experiences. Of course, our early years shape us, but I've learned to hold two truths simultaneously. Yes, I could have been a better parent in some ways. And no, that doesn't make me responsible for every difficulty my adult children face. The most freeing realization was this: my children don't need me to be perfect, and they never did. They need me to be human, to take responsibility for my actual mistakes, while refusing to accept blame for their entire life experience. They need me to love them enough to stop enabling their victim narratives and start believing in their ability to overcome challenges and create meaningful lives. If you're a parent dealing with adult children who blame you for their problems, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not responsible for fixing their entire life experience. You can love your children deeply while refusing to accept responsibility for every struggle they face as adults. The greatest gift you can give your adult children is not perfect parenting in the past, but the confidence that they have the strength and agency to create better lives for themselves now. Sometimes that means stepping back from the blame game and redirecting them to their own power to heal and grow. Your imperfect parenting produced these amazing human beings. Trust that they have what it takes to overcome whatever challenges they're facing, with or without your constant apologies for not being perfect 20 years ago. If this resonated with you, I'd love to have you subscribe to Seniors Matter. We're rebuilding a community of people who understand that loving our adult children sometimes means refusing to be their scapegoat. Because your peace matters too, and healthy relationships require accountability from both generations. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and remember that being an imperfect parent who did their best is nothing to be ashamed of.